No way! Matthew froze as he looked at the monitor, Clover deftly using her muzzle to unlock her own stable door. But instead of running away, the horse calmly moved to the next stall, continuing to free the other horses. One by one, Clover freed her companions, moving like a master, orchestrating the perfect escape. Matthew had noticed something strange about the horses during this time. Many mornings, a few would run loose, leisurely through the dusty yard, leaving tracks and chaos in their wake. This was not normal. Matthew had always managed to lock every door every evening without fail. Matthew had spent years at Golden Meadow Ranch under David and Laura and had never seen anything like it. It wasn't the wind, and it wasn't an accident, he thought, the thought repeating itself over and over in his mind. There had to be another explanation. At first he tried to brush it off. It's probably just a prank, he reasoned, thinking of the local teenagers who came to learn to ride. But the strange things didn't stop. Every morning the same sight greeted him, horses grazing freely, some standing near the water trough, others grazing without concern. Uncertainty crept into Matthew's mind. That morning, when he spotted Clover, his sleek black mare, rummaging through a spilled bucket of oats, he decided he'd had enough. He picked up the phone and called David and Laura, determined to solve the mystery. "David, Laura," Matthew called as he approached the pair walking home. "We need to talk about the barn. Something strange is going on." David, a placid man with silver curls at the temples, exchanged a worried look with Laura, her sharp, lively eyes reflecting her deep affection for the animals. The couple had spent years nurturing the ranch, fulfilling a lifelong dream. "What's wrong, Matthew?" David asked, his voice measured but attentive, recognizing the seriousness in his ranch hand's tone. "For weeks now, I've been finding stable doors open at dawn. It's not just one, it's several, and the horses are loose. At first, I thought I'd made a mistake, but I'm certain I lock them all every night." Laura folded her arms, glancing around the yard, where a few horses still roamed freely. "Could someone be sneaking in at night? Maybe someone from town, or a curious visitor trying to get close to the horses?" Her protective instincts for the animals flared at the thought of strangers lurking near the ranch. Matthew nodded. "That's what I wondered too, but who? No one could come onto the property without being noticed, especially not to do this every night. It doesn't feel like a prank." David and Laura's concern deepened. They understood how sensitive horses could be, despite their imposing size. If left unsupervised, they could easily injure themselves, undoing years of careful training that had made them gentle and reliable around people. A nighttime oversight could cost them everything. "So, what do you suggest, Matthew?" David asked, sensing his ranch hand had a plan. Matthew hesitated briefly, forming his thoughts. "We could install discreet cameras in the stables. That way, we'll see if someone, or something, is getting in." Laura raised an eyebrow. "Something? What exactly do you mean?" Matthew shrugged, feeling the weight of his uncertainty. "I don't know. Maybe an animal. Or it's possible one of the horses is opening the doors themselves, as ridiculous as that sounds." The notion drew a faint, incredulous smile from David. "Don't be so quick to dismiss it, Laura. Horses can surprise us. If it's Clover, or any of them, I'd like to see it for myself," he said, injecting a touch of humor to lighten the tension. Clover was no ordinary mare. Her intelligence and knack for mischief often left them all in awe. With this in mind, the three agreed to set up cameras that very night. The plan was straightforward. Position small, hidden cameras at each stable door to capture any unusual activity. By morning, they would finally have answers. As the first rays of sunlight streaked across the ranch, Matthew made his way purposefully to the shed where the camera monitor awaited. What he was about to discover would change everything. Yet, Matthew's mind was fixated entirely on the images he was about to uncover. His breath hitched with a mix of curiosity and nervousness, his fingers trembling slightly as he operated the device. "Let's see who's been messing around with my horses," he muttered under his breath. The screen flickered to life, and slowly, the footage from the previous night began to play. At first, everything seemed calm. The stable stood firm in the darkness, with only faint shadows shifting now and then. Adjusting the volume, Matthew listened to the familiar creak of the ground beneath the horses' hooves, a comforting sound that settled his nerves. For a moment, it appeared nothing unusual had happened. Then, just as the camera's clock struck 3 in the morning, something unexpected caught his eye. In the dim light, a figure moved toward Clover's stable door. Narrowing his eyes, Matthew leaned in closer. What he saw left him stunned. The figure wasn't a person. It was Clover himself. The dark coat of the horse gleamed faintly in the sliver of light, filtering through the stable's gaps. Matthew watched, incredulous, as Clover stretched his neck, bringing his muzzle to the latch. With a precision that seemed almost unnatural for a horse, Clover began fiddling with the latch using his teeth. He worked methodically, calmly, as though he had practiced this maneuver countless times before. "You've got to be kidding me," Matthew whispered, glued to the screen, unable to believe what he was witnessing. With a gentle nudge of his nose, Clover unlatched the door. He trotted out with an elegance that seemed almost deliberate, heading straight for another horse's stable. Using the same technique, he began to free his companion. The second horse, now liberated, whinnied softly as if in gratitude and joined Clover. Within minutes, Clover had released 3 more horses. Together, the small herd moved toward the corral, their steps careful, almost stealthy, as though they understood the importance of maintaining silence to avoid alerting anyone in the house. It was clear that Clover had assumed the role of a leader, guiding his companions with a serene confidence that left Matthew utterly amazed. Running a hand over his face, he tried to process what he had just seen. "That horse is smarter than half the people I know," he thought, suppressing a smile. Later that morning, after reviewing the entire recording, Matthew headed to the Van Ham residence to share his discovery with David and Laura. He found them in the kitchen, their morning coffee in hand. Without wasting time, he recounted the events he had observed, his voice carrying a blend of disbelief and excitement. "You're not going to believe this," Matthew began, barely able to contain a laugh. "The culprit is Clover. That horse of yours has some serious skills." He opened his stable door and let the others out too. David raised an eyebrow in astonishment, while Laura, though amused, looked skeptical. "How's that even possible?" David asked, scratching his head with a puzzled grin. "Are you saying he used his teeth?" Matthew nodded, his grin widening. "Exactly. He used his teeth like he knew exactly what he was doing. Honestly, it looked like he was enjoying it." Laura walked over to the window, gazing out at the pasture where Clover was grazing peacefully, blissfully unaware of the conversation. "I always knew he was special," she said softly, her eyes glimmering with pride and affection. "But I never imagined anything like this." To Laura, Clover had always been more than just a horse. He was a companion, a friend. That evening they set up the cameras again, eager to see what other surprises Clover had in store. And once again, the horse did not disappoint. Around midnight, with the same deliberate calm as before, Clover exited his stable. This time, he headed straight for the small shed where the feed was stored. With a gentle push, he managed to open the door. To everyone's amazement, Clover began pulling out bags of feed, sharing the bounty with his companions. Laura stifled a laugh as she watched the screen, her expression a mixture of disbelief and amusement. "That horse knows exactly what he's doing. Looks like he's throwing a party for his friends." Matthew and David couldn't help but join in her laughter. As the night wore on, they continued to watch in awe, realizing that Clover possessed a depth of intelligence and cunning that exceeded anything they had ever expected. Clover had earned their admiration, and in the stillness of those moments, The three of them silently acknowledged they were witnessing something extraordinary. Over the days, the tale of Clover, the escape artist mare, began to unfold in unexpected ways. Laura, captivated by Clover's cleverness and knack for mischief, decided to film some of the mare's nocturnal antics and sly tricks. Initially, the plan was to share the recordings with close friends and family who were already familiar with the mischievous horse from Golden Meadow Ranch. One calm morning, while reviewing a particularly amusing clip, Laura had an idea. What if she uploaded one of the videos to social media? Maybe someone else would enjoy Clover's charm, she thought, selecting a snippet that showcased the mare slipping out of her stable and methodically unlocking the doors of her companions with the precision of a seasoned thief. It didn't take long for the video to explode in popularity. Within days, hundreds had shared it, and soon the view count soared into the thousands. Comments poured in, with viewers marveling at Clover's intelligence. People left remarks like, "That horse is smarter than most of us," or "Clover deserves her own TV show." Neither Laura nor David had anticipated such a response, but they quickly noticed how Clover's fame was spreading like wildfire. In the weeks that followed, her story went so viral that reporters began arriving at Golden Meadow Ranch, eager to capture a glimpse of the farm's rising star. It felt surreal for the Banham family to see so many strangers wandering onto their land, cameras in hand. Yet, Clover's newfound fame seemed unstoppable. As visitors flocked to the ranch, the atmosphere shifted. Matthew and Laura soon realized they needed extra help. While they were proud of Clover and her unexpected celebrity, they were also determined to maintain the ranch's serenity and ensure the safety of all their animals. "Matthew, we need backup," Laura remarked one afternoon as they watched a growing line of cars parked near the entrance. "We can't handle all these visitors on our own." Matthew nodded, clearly feeling overwhelmed himself. "I agree, Laura, and it looks like Clover is loving the attention. Look at her, she's practically posing for the cameras." Sure enough, Clover was ambling near the fence, her large dark eyes watching the visitors with an almost calculated curiosity. The Banhams hired a couple of trusted locals to manage the influx of tourists. People traveled from far and wide just to see the door-unlocking mare in action. The days at Golden Meadow Ranch grew longer as the farm adapted to the constant flow of visitors and camera crews. Despite the crowds, Clover seemed to relish her role as the star attraction. She didn't just appear for spectators, she would occasionally repeat her tricks, much to everyone's delight. When she thought no one was looking, she'd wander over to the feed storage, carefully attempting to open the door with her practiced moves. The crowd would erupt in applause, treating it like a special performance. David, however, watched the spectacle with mixed emotions, pride intertwined with unease. The ranch was now generating unexpected income thanks to Clover's fame, yet he couldn't shake a lingering concern. This is her home, not a tourist attraction, he would think, during moments of quiet reflection. For the sake of Clover and the other horses, he knew they had to find the right balance. One evening, as the crowd began to disperse, David approached Clover, who was lying in the grass, seemingly tired from another long day of entertaining. He knelt beside her and whispered, "Well, Clover, you're quite the celebrity now, aren't you? But don't worry, you'll always be our mischievous favorite here at Golden Meadow." Clover lifted her head as though she understood his words, meeting his gaze with a calm and gentle look, almost as if to assure him that no amount of fame would change the clever mare he had always known. Over time, the Banhams and Matthew decided to set limits on the number of visitors allowed each day, aiming to preserve the peace of the ranch. They wanted to ensure that Golden Meadow remained a sanctuary, a place where Clover and the other horses could continue being themselves, free from the noise and constant gaze of the outside world. Not long after implementing the new restrictions, the ranch began to see visitors who were different from the usual crowd. Among them, a small group stood out for their excessive curiosity and, most notably, their almost obsessive interest in Clover. At first, Matthew and Laura thought little of it. After all, Clover had become somewhat of a local legend, and it wasn't unusual for people to want to learn more about him. However, as the days went by, their fascination started to feel suspicious. One afternoon, while guiding a group of visitors through the stables, Matthew noticed 3 men break away from the tour and head discreetly toward the area where Clover and the other horses were kept. Watching them from a distance, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Their questions were pointed, overly technical, as if their interest wasn't just in admiring Clover, but something far deeper. "What time do the stables usually close?" asked one of the men, a middle-aged man with a sparse beard and a steely gaze. A chill ran down Matthew's spine. Adjusting his hat, he replied cautiously, keeping his eyes locked on the man. "We close at sunset, once it gets dark. It's safer that way. We don't want any of the horses getting hurt with all the activity around here." The men exchanged quick glances, as if calculating something. Another man, younger and more reserved, let out a brief, awkward laugh to mask his unease. "And Clover? Is he always kept in his stable?" the younger man asked. Matthew felt his stomach tighten. Why so much curiosity about Clover? He forced a neutral expression, though an internal alarm had already gone off. "Clover is part of the family here at Golden Meadow Ranch," Matthew replied steadily, his tone firm and unwavering. "We make sure he's well cared for and always safe." Sensing the finality in his words, the men quickly shifted the conversation, realizing that Matthew wouldn't entertain any insinuations. Yet, from that moment on, he resolved to be more vigilant. That evening, back in his modest cabin near the stables, Matthew sat in thought, his mind replaying the odd encounter. Staring out at the silhouette of Golden Meadow under the moonlight, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. There was something about those men, their questions, that reminded him of whispers of theft from nearby towns. While Clover's fame had drawn many admirers, Matthew had never imagined facing such an unsettling possibility. The next morning, Matthew shared his concerns with Laura. As they walked together along the corral, he recounted the men's unusual questions. "Laura, I don't know. I don't want to sound paranoid, but those men didn't feel like regular tourists. They asked too much about the schedules, where Clover's kept." His voice trailed off, his brow furrowed. "Like they were planning something," Laura said, her expression growing serious. Usually optimistic by nature, she sighed deeply and nodded. "I see what you mean, Matthew. Maybe you're right. The truth is, with so many visitors, it's hard to tell who's here for the horses and who might have other intentions." They walked in silence for a while, the soft sounds of the horses filling the air. Finally, Laura offered a suggestion. "I think we should increase security for Clover and the other horses. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but we can't take any chances. Maybe we could reinforce the doors or add extra locks." Matthew agreed, feeling it was a sensible idea. "Yeah, and we can keep a closer eye on the cameras too, just in case there's any unusual activity at night." They decided that one of them would monitor the security cameras and maintain a more consistent presence in the stables over the next few nights. While Clover was undeniably special and cherished by many, they never imagined he would need such vigilant protection. But for them, the safety of their horses and the tranquility of Golden Meadow always came first. The following days were uneventful, with no signs of the men or any other suspicious visitors. Slowly, the ranch returned to its usual peaceful rhythm. Even so, Matthew remained on edge, a lingering sense of unease shadowing his thoughts. That night, it was Matthew's turn to keep watch over Golden Meadow. The day had been long, filled with exhausting tasks, and though he intended to stay alert while monitoring the cameras, fatigue soon crept over him. Settling into a chair with his eyes on the screens, he felt his body give in to the weariness. Without realizing it, sleep crept up on Matthew, wrapping him in its quiet embrace. Before he knew it, his eyes had closed, and he was plunged into a deep slumber as the silent night unfolded. At dawn, the restless sounds of the horses stirred him awake. Opening his eyes, it took him a few seconds to gather his bearings, still groggy from sleep. When he glanced at the surveillance monitors, the empty screens sent a jolt of fear through his chest. David. Were the horses still there? Matthew bolted out of the security room and raced to the stables. His worst fear materialized as he reached the barn. Several stall doors stood wide open, and the horses were gone. A chilling sense of dread gripped him as his eyes darted over the empty stalls. Clover, the prized horse of Golden Meadow Ranch, was also missing. The locks on the doors were broken, and the latches looked violently forced. There was no doubt about it. Someone had broken in during the night and stolen the animals. Chaos quickly descended upon Golden Meadow. Matthew, David, and Laura were running back and forth, desperate to make sense of what had happened. Word of the theft spread like wildfire, and the ranch's staff joined the frantic search, combing through every inch of the property, hoping for any trace of the missing horses. Yet, as hours passed, it became clear that they had been stolen. David, his face etched with worry, approached Matthew. "Did you see anything, Matthew? Did the cameras catch anything?" Matthew nodded grimly. "I'll check now, David. We must have recorded something, but..." His voice trailed off, heavy with guilt. He knew he had dozed off that night and blamed himself for not staying alert when it mattered most. Laura arrived beside them, her eyes blazing with determination. "We can't waste time. Call the police and check those videos. We are not letting them take Clover or the other horses." Matthew and Laura hurried back to the surveillance room, a mix of hope and dread churning in their stomachs as they reviewed the footage. At a specific point in the early morning, the cameras revealed the faint glow of headlights approaching down the ranch's dirt road. A black van pulled up near the stables. Matthew froze the video, focusing on the vehicle's license plate. Though blurry, parts of the number were still legible. Laura leaned in closer, squinting at the screen. "We could track this plate or at least get help from the nearby ranches to see if anyone spotted this van." Wasting no time, Matthew and Laura contacted the local authorities, sharing the information about the stolen horses and the partial plate number. They also reached out to neighboring ranches, issuing an alert and requesting their cooperation in the search. The hours that followed were steeped in tension. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, an eerie stillness settled over the ranch. David busied himself, trying to calm the few remaining horses, while Laura anxiously stayed by Matthew's side, waiting for any news. By midday, Matthew's phone buzzed with a call. It was a manager from a ranch a few miles away. "Matthew, I think we saw something. A black van passed by here early this morning. It was towing a trailer and, well, it looked like there were horses inside." Exchanging a look of urgency with Laura, Matthew thanked the man and asked him to relay all the details to the police. With every new clue, the hope of recovering Clover and the other horses grew stronger. The news of the horses' possible location brought renewed energy to Matthew and Laura. In no time, they accompanied the officers to the address provided, a small, run-down ranch on the outskirts of town. The atmosphere in the truck was heavy with anticipation, no one daring to break the silence. Each of them repeated the same thought in their heads. "This is our one shot to get Clover and the others back." The destination was a shabby stable behind a dusty house, its neglect evident even from afar. From the truck, Matthew spotted a couple of figures near the stable entrance, seemingly keeping watch. His heart raced at the thought of Clover and the other horses trapped inside. When they arrived, the police officers approached first, ensuring the situation was under control before allowing Matthew and Laura to step in. Matthew clenched his fists, a swirl of fear and determination coursing through him as he waited for the moment to act. His eyes never left the stable, hoping beyond hope to see Clover safe once again. They won't be harmed, Matthew thought, but these men need to understand they can't mess with Golden Meadow Ranch. After a few heated discussions with the guards, the officers managed to unlock the stable doors. As soon as the entrance swung open, Matthew and Laura rushed inside. There they were, Clover and the other horses, seemingly unharmed, though their coats were dusty and their eyes reflected exhaustion. The moment Clover spotted Matthew, she raised her head and let out a soft neigh, a sound of recognition that brought immediate relief. Matthew stepped closer, gently stroking her neck. "You're safe now, Clover. We're going home, girl," he murmured, as Clover nuzzled his shoulder, a gesture of trust that made his heart ache with gratitude. While the horses were freed one by one, Laura couldn't hold back a tear of relief. They had been found. The fear of losing them still lingered in her chest, but the thought of returning them to Golden Meadow Ranch brought a sense of calm she hadn't felt in days. One of the men from the private estate tried to explain himself to the police, claiming ignorance. He said someone had sold the horses to him at a bargain, and he hadn't asked questions. Matthew, still clutching Clover's reins, watched in disbelief, leaving the legal matters to the officers. For him and Laura, the priority was getting the horses back home. What felt like endless hours of paperwork finally ended, and they were free to leave. As they made their way back, the setting sun bathed the sky in shades of orange and violet. Matthew, a mixture of joy and fatigue washing over him, kept glancing at Clover. Despite everything, she seemed calm, as if understanding that her journey back home had begun. When they reached Golden Meadow Ranch, the sight was heartwarming. Neighbors and ranch workers had gathered, waiting anxiously for their return. Friends from nearby towns, who had heard about the stolen horses, greeted them with smiles and cheers. One by one, the horses were led back to their stalls amidst exclamations of relief and joy. "So glad they're back," one of the workers exclaimed, clapping enthusiastically as Matthew and Laura guided Clover and the others to their familiar spaces. "It's a miracle you found them so quickly," murmured a neighbor to David, whose glistening eyes betrayed the depth of his gratitude for the safe return of his beloved animals. Matthew stayed with Clover for a while, watching as she explored her stall, reacquainting herself with its every corner and the comforting scents she knew so well. Clover seemed at peace, as if she understood that Golden Meadow wasn't just a place. It was her sanctuary, her true home. After a moment of silence, David addressed everyone gathered. "We can't thank you enough for your support. Thanks to all of you, Golden Meadow remains the safe haven we've always dreamed of for our animals." His voice, steady but filled with emotion, resonated deeply with everyone present. That night, as the ranch quieted down and the horses rested safely, Matthew and Laura sat together, reflecting on what had happened. They both knew that steps needed to be taken to prevent future incidents. Golden Meadow had always been an open and welcoming place, but this experience reminded them that not everyone shared their respect and love for animals. The following morning, with the events still fresh in their minds, David and Laura called a meeting with Matthew and the ranch staff. Ensuring the safety of the horses, especially Clover, had become a top priority. Everyone agreed Golden Meadow needed to adapt. David outlined a plan with a serious expression. "From now on, we'll limit daily visitors and tighten security. We'll protect this place and our animals, not just with love, but with clear strategy," he declared firmly. They also decided to install reinforced locks on the stables. Laura, her concern for Clover ever present, believed these measures were essential. Clover had become somewhat of a local celebrity, and while that brought admiration, it also attracted the wrong kind of attention. That afternoon, as workers installed the new locks, Laura and Matthew walked to Clover's stable. They stood there for a moment, silent but united in their resolve. For Clover and the rest of the horses, they were determined to make Golden Meadow a fortress of safety, where the love and care they poured into their animals would remain unshaken by the outside world. The mare watched curiously as the men worked, their hands moving with precision to install the new security devices. Her gaze lingered on the tools and their every motion, as if sensing that something significant had shifted in the atmosphere of Golden Meadow Ranch. Clover seemed to know things wouldn't be the same. "You're not going to like this at first, girl," Laura whispered, her voice soft as she ran her hand through Clover's silky mane. The mare responded with a gentle snort, her warm breath brushing against Laura's palm, almost as if she understood every word. Matthew, standing nearby, couldn't help but smile at the bond between Laura and Clover. The mare wasn't just an animal to them, she was a companion, a confidant, and in many ways, the heart of Golden Meadow. As the days passed, Clover and the other horses slowly adapted to the new security measures. Though she initially tried to work the locks as she always had, it wasn't long before Clover realized her tricks no longer worked. Laura and Matthew often spotted her testing the latches with her nose, her movements deliberate but ultimately resigned. It was as if she knew these barriers were there for her own protection. The story of Golden Meadow and Clover's daring escape captivated the local community. Before long, the ranch began receiving invitations to speak at events and share their experiences. David and Laura saw this as an opportunity, not to gain recognition, but to educate others on the importance of animal welfare. They wanted their story to inspire others to show the same care and dedication to the creatures under their watch. The couple hosted small gatherings at Golden Meadow, inviting families, children, and animal lovers to hear Clover's tale. Laura and Matthew guided the visitors, explaining how the ranch had to adapt and the profound lessons they had learned from Clover's escapades. During these visits, Clover became the undeniable star. Children gazed at her with wide-eyed wonder, while adults listened intently, imagining the adventures of the escape artist mare. With her gentle and curious nature, Clover seemed to bask in the attention, often nudging visitors playfully or leaning in for an apple slice or a tender pat. "She seems to understand everything," a guest remarked one afternoon, watching Clover's interaction with a group of children. "It's like she knows how special she is," Laura replied with a smile. "She's more than special," Matthew added thoughtfully. "She's taught us to be more careful, more responsible. Honestly, I think she takes care of us more than we take care of her." The events brought people from across the region, and Golden Meadow became a cherished part of the community. It wasn't just a ranch, it was a beacon of protection, education, and dedication to animal welfare. David, noticing the impact their story was having, reached out to local authorities, eager to collaborate on raising awareness about farm safety and animal care. Together, they launched informational campaigns and implemented safety measures to help other farms avoid similar incidents. As time passed, Golden Meadow regained its sense of tranquility. Days began and ended with the gentle rustling of the prairie grass and the rhythmic sound of hooves on the soft earth. The presence of Clover and her fellow horses brought vitality to the ranch, their freedom contained, but no less joyful. A deeper sense of peace had settled over the land, born of the trials they had faced together. Clover, once the clever and mischievous escape artist, had grown accustomed to the reinforced locks and precautions. Where she once eyed the new barriers with unease, she now accepted them with calmness, as if understanding that Golden Meadow was not merely a place to live, but a sanctuary for her and her stablemates. Though she remained playful and spirited, her antics were now under the watchful eyes of Laura and Matthew, who saw her as more than just part of the ranch. To them, Clover was the embodiment of everything Golden Meadow stood for. One Sunday morning, as the sun crept over the hills and cast its golden light across the fields, Matthew walked through the stable, his steps unhurried. Each corner of the barn felt familiar, like an extension of himself. He paused by Clover's stall, watching her with quiet admiration. In her, He saw not just a horse, but the resilience, joy, and lessons that Golden Meadow had come to symbolize. Matthew's gaze softened as it landed on each horse, his heart brimming with warmth. When he reached Clover, the mare greeted him with a gentle nudge to his shoulder, a tender gesture that Matthew answered with a quiet smile. "Good morning, my friend," he murmured, stroking her neck affectionately. "Ready for a new day?" Clover responded with a soft snort and a shake of her head, as if acknowledging his words. Matthew chuckled under his breath, a fleeting sense of contentment washing over him. For a brief moment, everything at Golden Meadow Ranch felt as it should, peaceful, harmonious. The journey to this point had been anything but easy. The ranch had faced its share of challenges, yet it emerged stronger and more united than ever. Over time, Laura and David began to see the transformation that Golden Meadow Ranch had undergone. No longer just a haven for horses, it had become a symbol of compassion and respect for animals. Though visitor numbers were now restricted, those who arrived came with reverence and gratitude, drawn by Clover's story and the relentless efforts of the family to preserve the ranch's sanctuary-like essence. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the porch, David shared his thoughts with Laura. "You know," he began, his voice tinged with wonder, "I never imagined Golden Meadow would become something so extraordinary. At first, it was just a place for us to care for horses and enjoy the countryside. But now, it feels like we're part of something much greater." Laura met his gaze with a gentle smile. "You're right, David. And I think Clover taught us the importance of protecting what we love. She and the other horses have given us so much, not just companionship, but a purpose." They fell silent, their eyes drawn to the meadow where Clover and her companions grazed, silhouetted against the vibrant colors of the setting sun. In that simple scene lay the essence of Golden Meadow Ranch, a sanctuary where animals were cherished, respected, and protected. Over time, the tale of Clover and the ranch grew into a cherished local legend. Stories spread of the mare who once defied her stable's confines, inspiring an entire community and fostering peace in that tranquil corner of the countryside. Children visiting the ranch listened with wide-eyed fascination as Laura recounted Clover's adventures, many leaving with dreams of one day creating their own havens for animals. Life on the ranch settled into a steady rhythm, marked by calm days and serene nights. Yet, something had shifted in the hearts of those who called it home. Matthew, who had always shared a unique bond with the horses, felt a deeper commitment to their care. Each day, he spent time with Clover, running his fingers through her mane and speaking to her in hushed tones, as though they shared an unspoken understanding. One quiet night, under a sky glittering with stars, Matthew sat near the stable, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. From within her stall, Clover poked her head out, observing him in silence. Feeling her watchful eyes, Matthew smiled. "Thank you, Clover," he said softly. "Thank you for reminding us what it means to truly care and love." The mare's deep, soulful eyes met his, and Matthew felt once again the profound connection between them, a bond that transcended words. Golden Meadow Ranch was more than just a place. It was a refuge where humans and animals shared a rare and sacred connection, and Clover embodied the heart of that bond. The ranch remained a sanctuary of tranquility and protection, offering solace to those seeking peace and fostering a profound respect for all living beings. Clover's story is truly amazing, isn't it? Her cleverness and determination go beyond being just entertaining. They remind us of the deep, meaningful connections we share with animals. This isn't just a story about a horse, it's about trust, intelligence, and the incredible surprises life has in store. Who would have thought a horse could mastermind such a flawless escape? What do you think of Clover's clever escape? Leave a comment below and don't forget to like and subscribe so we can share more stories like this. Together, let's continue to explore these incredible connections.